This week on The Droids, we talk about The Mandalorian, Chapter 14, The Tragedy, and what a tragedy indeed. That's The Droids today.
It's hard to do with one person.
Welcome back to The Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Chris, I am Ryan. Sam and Mike have different lives than either of us, and they have more responsibility than either of us have. So we are the ones here with you today.
Right. Our sole responsibility was watching this episode and telling you about it.
I'm not responsible to another human being, let alone several. So my only thing was that I had to get up early and watch this, and then record this with you.
Yeah. My cats had no problem with the first part of that, making me wake up early, so that was great.
Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's a Mando Friday. I'm always happy on a Mando Friday.
It's a cozy Friday here in New York City. It's
really
starting to rain.
Yeah. I love a good overcast winter sky.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah.
Get a glass of wine going or just a nice cup of tea.
Yeah. Get the fireplace up on the 4K. We're ready to go.
This is unrelated to the Star Wars, but Did you watch the Rockefeller Center tree lighting the other day?
I did. Yes, I did.
Whoa. Well,
yeah.
It was quite the happening, and for those of you who are young, look up Johnny Rzeznik's face from a few decades ago.
The Goo Goo Dolls, right?
The Goo Goo Dolls lead singer. Something happened.
It was interesting. Why do rock bands after a certain point in time start to dress like characters from the video game Rock Band?
It was
like
I was thinking, what a missed opportunity. And this discussion is really for no one, and I could hear Mike screaming. What a missed opportunity during a time where New York is, things are, everybody stay safe out there. Things are not good right now. New York is shutting down again, and they could have played Broadway, where the line of the chorus is Broadway is dark tonight, and it would have been this real moment.
Yeah.
But instead they sang Let It Snow.
It was like an original Christmas song by the Goo Goo Dolls.
Well, that was the first one, and then they played literally Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, where there was one verse and one chorus, and that's it.
I Googled what time it was going to... About halfway through, we Googled what time it was going to be lit. Mm-hmm. And then I think NBC pulled a fast one on us because they delayed it on the broadcast until they showed us.
One takeaway is that Al Roker is an angel on Earth.
He's great.
He just is, and we're thinking of you always.
And
Al.
Notable Mandalorian fan.
Notable. So is Savannah Guthrie.
Yeah.
She loves The Mandalorian. Speaking of The Mandalorian, Chapter 14, The Tragedy today.
There it is. Mike would be proud.
I have a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
I've never done cocaine, but people talk about coming down, and I have a feeling this is kind of what it feels like.
They had to kind of wean us out of last week's episode, and I feel
Chris,
like
it's a family show. Enough with the weenuses.
Wait a second. Did you see the monsters' faces though? But we had to, they kind of had to like tailor us down a little bit because of the highs of last week's episode. I think by giving us, we could say it, there's no spoilers here. I mean, it's all spoilers.
There's no spoilers because it's all spoilers. You can't call it a spoiler. Spoilers.
The introduction of Boba Fett. I mean, for 1 second, I thought, because the mission was to go to that mountain, throw Grogu up there, and then a Jedi's going to come. So for 1 second, I thought they were going to pull a little trick on us, and it wasn't going to be Boba Fett yet.
Right.
I thought the ship was going to come. It was going to be just some new Jedi. That would be cool, but then he'd be like, I can't do this. And then, because of that, Boba Fett would be like, Mando, you know where my ship is. That's an episode that didn't happen.
Sure.
So instead, we just got full-on Boba Fett this episode.
Yeah, so Slave 1 shows up, and you think maybe it'll be some kind of misdirection, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I had almost completely forgotten that we saw Boba Fett at the beginning of the season.
So I will say I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, yeah, he's in this. Oh,
yeah, instead of me being like, oh, my God, it was more like me like going, oh, yeah, right, right.
Exactly, yeah.
So
At that reveal, though, I was going to say, I still was not convinced 100% that it was Boba Fett. Like, we had all the evidence pointed towards us, but, I mean, he's a clone. It could have been a number of any clone troopers.
Right. Could have been Rex. Could have been Cody.
It could have been Rex, but why was he obsessed with the armor? And we kind of got the little lesson in that episode about how the armor survives Sarlacc monsters. Right. So, put it together. And then we got ourselves a little Boba Fett, which is kind of fun. Right.
So, how did you feel overall about this episode?
This episode, to me, it had a little bit of the kind of... This one felt more like a sci-fi TV show than I think any of the other episodes have this season. Like, it felt... First off, I think they actually shot outside. That did not look like volume work. If they did, then
some of it really looked like volume work, though.
Because it looked like Power Rangers.
It looked like they drove up to Bakersfield.
Yes.
And they shot some stuff outside.
Exactly. It looked like the set of when CSI is has a war scene.
And it's supposed to be the Middle East.
Exactly.
And it's clearly Bakersfield.
Exactly. So that right there, I was kind of put into a mode of okay, this is going to be more of a I don't know if the word's cheesy, but it's just going to be more of a tackier episode. I think we're not going to get too much. There's going to be a lot of fighting. It was cool. I'm kind of indifferent to this episode. I think it was a good cool down. I kind of wish that it does set up some neat plot things, but I kind of wish that they had saved the Boba Fett for later or did something different with him. I don't know. How do you feel?
So we should say that this episode was directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Jon Favreau, and this episode couldn't have been more directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Jon Favreau.
Not knowing that going into this, as on the tip of my tongue, the whole episode was, I know who directed this. Yeah, and I'm I forgot that he was on the list, but I'm this looks exactly like this. This is the way things were all kind of center framed, and I was almost. This should have been projected on a 4:3 television, and it would have been perfect.
Also his idea, Robert Rodriguez's sensibilities of what quote unquote looks cool are incredibly dated.
right. It's that wide shot of a mountain of people walking up to it.
Yeah. And then... Also the shot of Ming-Na Wen jumping in slow motion and turning around and shooting two stormtroopers. While is cool, it was cool in 1994.
It's just action movie cool. It's still of that vein where it's okay, we're action movies, but now we can have a little more artistic license with the action, and that's that kind of shot.
So I actually had, while this episode is kind of the ending kind of propels us into what will be the closing of the season, I had a lot of strong feelings because I think that this episode kind of encapsulates a lot of what I think is wrong with Star Wars right now.
Go on.
And I think that it's very funny because my wife Nicole, who watched it with me, said at the end of the episode, it said directed by Robert Rodriguez, written by Jon Favreau, and I said, of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? And she said, that's exactly what you said last week. And she said, but the tone, tone was different. When I saw Dave Filoni, I said, of course it was. Why wouldn't it be?
Right.
So it's the same feeling. It's just it's the same sentence, just different feelings about it.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to think that while moment to moment, and last episode notwithstanding, I loved the Ahsoka episode. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to think that this is not the Star Wars we need, because I think that there's this piece of me that is watching the creators who have been given Star Wars in this big way. Jon Favreau, J.J. Abrams. Obviously, I'm not including Rian Johnson because he's also been put in this spot where people are whatever, that movie doesn't count. Some people love it. Obviously, we love it, but it's J.J. and Jon Favreau have kind of come forward as the prominent Star Wars storytellers right now. Mm-hmm. Over the new era, and Filoni is obviously involved in this show. And he got to finish Clone Wars and stuff, and I am a big fan of what he's doing. But Jon Favreau is kind of the spearhead of the show. And I think that we're watching a lot of people who saw Star Wars in 1977, have an idea of what it was, and they are now getting their chance to do their version of that.
Yes.
They're like, they all have all this unfinished business of
Yes.
like the Star Wars stories they want to tell, which is fair, but at the same time, I feel like if we keep doing that, we're never going to move forward.
It's kind of treading water a little bit.
Yeah, so like last week was so exciting to me because it was new, and we had like Ahsoka, who's not a new character, but she's a new-ish character, you know, within the last decade or, you know, give or take. And kind of moving forward with, you know, new takes on General Thrawn, new takes on like Jedi, and Ahsoka kind of identifying not as a Jedi. Yeah, that's all interesting.
We weren't really learning anything this episode.
Right, and I feel like Boba Fett is kind of like the keystone to a lot of that.
Yes.
Which is, I don't find Boba Fett as a character all that interesting.
Well,
I understand he looks very cool.
Yes, and I think the thing that happened with Boba Fett was he was kind of like, I feel like he, early on, Boba Fett, before we had the prequels, he was almost like the litmus test of like, do you know Star Wars? And then it was kind of like, if you know who Boba Fett is, then like, it's this character, he's in the movie maybe 10 minutes tops, all of them, right? Like, barely.
He was like the Jason Todd
yes.
of Star Wars, where it's like, if you know who that is, you have at least a baseline knowledge of this
Yes,
stuff.
you know more than your average bear. And I think then what happened, though, somewhere along the line, he got this kind of like lore and legacy and became like this fan favorite too, almost to a fault, where it's just like, oh no, Boba Fett was the cool character I liked. And then in the prequels introduced his father and his parentage, and I think that just came out of this kind of like quiet fandom that George Lucas saw and was kind of like, oh, people will like Boba Fett. Let's show how Boba Fett came to be. But I don't think the character was ever designed, and I could be completely eating my foot on this, but I don't ever think he was really designed with that much depth.
Yeah, and also, you know, George Lucas has always said about like making all the new Star Wars movies that he was dedicated to showing new things. Mm-hmm. You know, like even when he wanted to do the sequel trilogy originally, he was like, no one wants this, but I want to show something new. Yes. And like the way that Dave Filoni has kind of been his protege, he's continued on with that in a way. Obviously, he loves Boba Fett and Filoni loves The Mandalorian, but he at least took that and like expanded the lore and made it like very interesting.
Yeah, and it was motivated, and it worked. I mean, I accepted the story. I like that we do. I think because of what George Lucas did in the prequels, I like this better than if it was just a random Boba Fett. Like now that we have a little bit of the lineage, like I think that helped this case. If we didn't have anything in the prequels, then it would have just been like, oh, okay, we're just throwing him in there.
I think that like Lucas and Filoni, in carrying on his vision in a way, have this dedication to showing something new and expanding the universe. Or, you know, George Lucas isn't involved anymore, but did. Yeah. Where people like JJ, and I'm putting Rian Johnson in that camp too, as wanting to expand the universe. I think clearly he wanted to do that with Last Jedi. People like JJ and Jon Favreau want to, and Robert Rodriguez, who directed this, it seems like they just want to recreate the feeling that they once had.
Yes.
As opposed to expanding on it. And I think that those two things don't have to exist. They're not mutually exclusive. Watching the Clone Wars, it's all like new stuff and interesting stuff. It still feels like Star Wars. It's still exciting. But I think that this episode, I don't want to get like mean.
Yeah.
But it was just like this perfect visualization. When like Boba Fett shows up in the armor, I was like, well, this is kind of like the microcosm of the whole thing. Which is like you're trying to create this thing, but it like it's this like he's like kind of old and like kind of chubby and like doesn't look cool, and they wanted it to look cool. It's not like a thing where they were commenting on like, look, he's old and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. Like, it's not like when Timothy Olyphant was wearing the armor and it kind of misfit him.
Right. This was like this misfit in a different way, but it was just like it was this thing where I was just like, I was like, this is like this thing peaked a long time ago. In terms of like the Boba Fett interest.
I think just kind of thinking about it here, and I was talking to my brother-in-law, shout out to Dave, listener of the pod, about this episode, after we had both watched it, and I mentioned to him, I said, like, oh, it's going to be really hard-pressed for me to be on Boba Fett's side. Like, he's like now Boba Fett's a good guy? Like he like
it's kind of like Godzilla, where like by the second few movies it's like he's like the friend.
Yeah, exactly. It was like he did some pretty bad things. Like he sold out Luke's or Han Solo. Like, I think
he's no good to me dead.
Exactly. Exactly. But I think this kind of goes back to the directors you just mentioned of what they're doing is they want Star Wars to be liked so bad that they're willing to just make Boba Fett a good guy. Like, they want the essence of Star Wars just to be liked, and I think in turn that means they want people to like what they're making.
Yeah. And it's also...
So they're just trying to, like, I can't imagine in what world, why would Boba Fett, like, be... I know characters have many, like, they're onions, right, Shrek?
Yeah,
there's many layers. There's many layers. I get it, but Boba Fett in Star Wars, I think it's fair.
He didn't even have a face.
Yes, he didn't even have a face. I mean,
I guess Din Djarin also kind of.
We got his origin story as well, which is sad and I guess motivating why he would hate the Jedi. But I think it was a change that I don't know if it was needed, but maybe a Boba Fett redemption story.
The Jedi, but we've never this isn't even about Jedi.
Exactly. It's just like maybe an origin story. Oh, I mean, he's helping. Pretend. Well, I guess he doesn't really know who the child is or anything because he was been just hanging out in a Sarlacc pit.
So
it's just an interesting. It's just like fan service.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, it's like if you want to look at like the direct hypocrisy of kind of fans who can't get behind The Last Jedi but like love Rise of Skywalker and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of those fans are like, how can you expect me to like Kylo Ren? He killed Han Solo. This is Han Solo's son.
Yes.
Who's like has a very complex, especially in The Last Jedi, well fleshed out emotional interiority.
Exactly. We understand what was going on.
So they say, I'll never forgive him for killing Han Solo. Meanwhile, they're probably stoked to see Boba Fett, who froze Han Solo in carbonite.
Yes.
And like basically screwed the entire team.
Yes.
And it's like, look at this. So you can forgive him because like you knew him, I'm putting that in quotes. You liked this character when you were a kid.
Right.
And you like, it's like, there is this direct hypocrisy that's like so there, like so right in front of it and transparent.
Like the way you can tell that Boba Fett was never meant to be, and this is my opinion, never meant to be more than he was in the original trilogy. It was the way that Boba Fett dies. Yeah. Because Han Solo, Mr. Magoo's him with a staff. He goes flying in the air, and then he lets out a Wilhelm-ish scream and falls into a pit.
Yeah, and then George kind of like retconned it because he knew that people liked the character a lot.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't think that like Boba Fett's backstory in the prequels is like unengaging. It's like cool that like
it's a story.
It's fine.
Yeah,
it's good, and it's like cool. Like if you're gonna do the thing where you make the Star Wars universe kind of small and it's all the same players, it's like you're gonna plug someone in there. Why not Boba Fett?
Yeah.
And there's also an issue. I think this show really has a supporting character / cameo issue.
Sure.
Which is that I think that most of them are bad.
It became a little self-aware, I think, which might be it.
Like Timothy Olyphant, an actor who I really like. We talked in that episode. I didn't think he was very good in that episode that he was in. Yeah. I think that Gina Carano is bad. I think Bill Burr is distracting and bad. I think that
I was gonna say you probably like Gina Carano in this episode because they're like, "Hey, could you go on this mission?" She's like, "No," and I was like, "Oh, thank God." It's like, "Yep."
I thought that the Boba Fett actor. I'm sorry, I don't know his name off the top of my head. Yeah. Let me look this up real quick. I want to.
This is a Star Wars podcast.
Tamura Morrison. We've mentioned him before.
Yeah.
I think that he's a bad actor, and it's like it's becoming distracting that every time someone shows up that isn't in like an alien costume. Like I think Horatio Sands is very good. I think Nick Nolte was very good. Clancy Brown was very good. Mm-hmm. But it's like I mean, when I saw that Bill Burr was coming back, I was like, we gotta be kidding with this. Like, we have the Boba Fett thing. It's like, how much, like, more, like, old, like, it just, like, it just feels so old. And I'm not saying that, like, older people can't tell good Star Wars stories. It's just more that it's, like, Jon Favreau probably clearly just likes Bill Burr's stand-up.
Yep.
And he thought it'd be fun to put him in a Star Wars show.
Well, they are filming. Rumor is they're filming
you guys like
Obi-Wan.
You guys like Grogu? What is it, Grogu?
What is it? What is it? Put on the internet?
Everybody with their Grogu.
Well, they are filming allegedly Obi-Wan in Boston, so maybe
yeah, maybe he'll show.
Maybe he'll show up at it.
Ben Kenobi? Obi-Wan Kenobi? Okay. Yeah, okay.
It is interesting that Bill Burr is in this at all, let alone that they brought him back. Like, this is the risk with these cameos. Like, obviously he was a fan favorite, and then, like you said, he's probably just friends with Jon Favreau, and then now he's in another episode. Also, they wrote a backstory for him very quickly in this episode.
Yeah, like an Imperial sharpshooter or something.
He's the only sharpshooter that can get him out or something. Did they talk about that in his previous episode? I can't remember. Or
it's
it was
so
good.
Strange,
it was a good
catch-up.
I
enjoy this show so much moment to moment, but there's also just so many, like, you know, the season is probably, I think this one's probably 8 episodes also.
Yeah.
Oh, and is that it? And each episode is between 30 and 40 minutes, and, like, half of them are unnecessary, and then even those, like, okay, so, like, for instance, this episode, he tries to go into the force field that Grogu's in 3 times.
3 times.
And it doesn't work any of the times.
Rule of thirds.
Yeah, and literally the 3rd time Nicole said out loud, she's like, we're doing this again?
I do like, that was my other thing that I said, but where, why didn't he just put the backpack on again and fly up to the mountain at the end?
Oh my God.
They built some logic in the episode.
How many times were we going to see Boba Fett whack people, like, and crack their helmets with his staff? It happened, less than 7 times.
Yes. It was... They were stalling for time in this episode a little bit.
Yeah, it was like, it literally felt like, I think this episode was 35 minutes. And
I'll tell you what, it did not start out that way. Or, like, it didn't feel that way when it started. I was like, wow, they're putting them right on the thing. They're going for it. Like, I thought that was awesome. I thought, that could have been fixed. Just seeing something. Like, if we saw some kind of Jedi thing, I'd been like, this is the best episode ever. Yeah. If we would have heard Qui-Gon's voice or something, I would have been like, amazing. Like, they could have done that, but they threw him on the thing. So basically, they're writing Baby Yoda out of this episode. They're like, nah, we'll put him in this dome where no one.
Alone a lot.
The irony of Mando leaving and then Boba immediately falling asleep, and the thing, like, the thing just disappearing. Where it's like, oh man, if Mando had been there, literally.
Grogu. You said Boba. I was like, Boba didn't fall asleep.
I'm sorry, Grogu, Boba Grogu. If that's a Miyazaki character, but if you 2 seconds was all, like, the time is literally when Mando turned around, Grogu had passed out. like if Mando had been like, well, let me just check one more time just in case I could do this.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting at the end that, like, they actually get him. Like, I was like, it didn't even cross my mind.
Yes.
Until my wife said it, that she was like, do you think they're going to, like, kidnap him and then the rest of the season is going to be them getting him back? And I was like, oh, it didn't even cross my mind, but obviously.
Yeah, I think that... So were those were robots then?
Yeah, that was confusing because he said, like, the
Dark Troopers?
The Dark Troopers, and I was like, oh, these are going to be like the midichlorian things.
Yes. But they were
then it was just robots.
That they kept, like, focusing on their faces. I was very confused. I was like,
and then I thought, like, surely, as soon as he said the Dark Troopers, I was like, okay, these are, like, the midichlorian soldiers.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I was like, so surely a Jedi is going to have to show up
to fight those things.
To fight them. Yep. And then it was just
they just Iron Manned in, grabbed them, and Iron Manned out. And then I like the just plot wise, we're just like, stand down. You can't shoot bait. Like, they've been so dangerous with Grogu throughout the whole series, and this is the time where they're like, don't fire. It's too risky.
There's a very funny wide shot under the, like, I guess not Proto Star Destroyer or whatever, like the new First Order Star Destroyer is.
Yeah.
Where Slave One just kind of, like, they're like turn around and it just kind of, like, goes like.
Exactly. He just, like, goes. Do you think that was the actual? Oh, I wonder. We'll probably find out that was the original model
Oh my god! Yeah. They spent
Slave One.
During quarantine, they had like 15 people putting together like the original clay models.
Right, exactly. They probably found the old Kenner kit, or what was the model kit with the M? I can't remember the name of it, but they probably found.
And Jon Favreau's like, I invented this new way to shoot ships on film.
The big takeaway of this episode, and I imagine next episode it'll be rebuilt, but the Razor Crest blew up. I thought that was a genuine surprise in this episode.
I found that stressful because I thought that's a lot of damage.
Yes, and then I was confused that basically why didn't they all get into Boba's ship? Would have been
which has been established in Clone Wars that ship can fit several people.
Yes, so I feel like we should have had a little bit of that, but that's okay. For some reason, he took his jetpack off, not thinking he needed it at all.
That also didn't. They said, "Let's talk. Everybody, put your weapons down." And then he said, "Take off your jetpack."
Yes.
And it was like, I don't understand. Is that so he doesn't leave?
It must have been so he doesn't bolt. But they should have.
Like, it just seemed like a real afterthought.
Okay, I'm gonna fight, but let me put this jetpack on because it probably could be. That was my main gripe with the episode. But I think overall it was fine. I mean, we got Boba Fett. I'm interested to know. I feel like they've done this stuff with Boba Fett, and people are going to be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." Like, I feel like people are expecting like a mind blowing thing, and I'm wondering if it's the ordering that we got of like Ahsoka and then Boba Fett. I wonder if the intention was like, "Oh man, you think this is cool? Wait till who you see we have next week."
And it's like.
And what I think, honestly, what's happened is like it's and not to like split the Star Wars fandom, but it's kind of like one for us, one for them.
And I acknowledge that like Ahsoka has been around for a long time now, so it's not like it's like this new. Yeah, she's not this brand new character,
right? I think it's just they were just reveals for two different audiences, and I just happened to fall in the former as more excited than the latter because we've seen it before, and it just every time we chip away at them, I feel like it's like, oh no, just keep them in that Christmas special cartoon.
Yeah. Chris, I feel the need that we should acknowledge that when we spoke about the Ahsoka episode last week, that we were unaware of the allegations out there about Rosario Dawson. Mm-hmm. And I want to acknowledge that, we were very effusive in our praise for her, and obviously we enjoyed the episode very much. But that was something that we were unaware of, and we don't want people to think that we were like purposely like, avoiding it as a subject.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We didn't know. We read about it afterward. It sounds, it sounds like a terrible situation. And like, all sympathy to the victim and I felt the need to acknowledge it because we were so effusive and didn't acknowledge it at all. And genuinely, this isn't like us making an excuse. We genuinely were unaware of it.
Yes. I appreciate you saying that, Ryan. Yeah, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. And I think there's some context that should be cleared up on that, I think, on many levels.
So we apologize to anyone who thought that, who maybe felt hurt or like we were being negligent. We apologize for that. We were completely unaware of it.
Yeah.
And obviously our sympathy is with the victim on this. So
we read about it in the Vanity Fair article. So if you want to learn more about that, it's in the Vanity Fair article.
And also, I originally heard about it because another Star Wars podcast called Sky Talkers that I really enjoy. They brought it up and they did a great episode about the Ahsoka episode, and really interesting. Aside from that element of it, they also had such interesting takes on Ahsoka and how they felt about how that story was handled. So I highly recommend listening to that episode that they did too.
Tip of the cat to Sky Talkers.
Tip of the cat to Sky Talkers. Chris, The Mandalorian, obviously, I love the show. I love Star Wars. And I hope that we eventually can move forward with it. I think it's just that I'll love anything they put out for a long time, aside from Rise of Skywalker. But I think that when we see glimpses of what an expansion of the world is, it's very exciting, and I think that we need more of that. I think we need more of it.
I watching Clone Wars to kind of fill in the gaps between Mando episodes really teaches you that lesson. Like there is like, it's so refreshing to see a new take, a new story, a new character, like a new world,
and building off of what we have. You know, it's like
the thing that gets me.
I just got the episodes where the younglings go and like get their kyber crystals.
Yeah.
I thought, like, you know, in any other show that would be this kind of like one-off, like, silly thing. But I was like, this is incredible. Yeah. Like, they built in, like, we know that there's like a ritual where they go and get their crystals for their lightsabers, but now we're like showing it.
Yes.
So it's like it's expanding on something that already existed, but it's in this like new and exciting way. I just think it's so brilliant.
The wildest
This isn't news. This happened a decade ago.
But that's the wildest part to me is like, those stories are there. Like, let's get those people. Like, let's start telling it. But I mean, overall, I think this was one of I like this episode more so than I think other episodes of this season. Like, it wasn't definitely not the bottoms for me. I think I do like Robert Rodriguez's directing style. I think there's like something tactile to it, which I like, and it also had that weird like sci-fi TV show vibe, which waxes a little nostalgic, but it's all right. It's fine. It's fine for a random episode of the Mando. I think Mando, there's times I wish that it was a Saturday afternoon rerun that you just caught, and I think that would make it you would feel a lot. I would put less at stake, but I think it's good. We got something. I
think it's just indicative. For me, this episode was more indicative of like bigger, like macro issues that I'm having with how the world.
I'm excited for the setup. I'm excited for the setup. I mean, I think they did a good job. Kind of, oh no, he can't get caught. Well, it happened.
And the Darksaber stuff is exciting. Yeah, you know,
it was fun to see Grogu using some Force.
That was very cool.
So I think there was redeeming moments in this episode. Overall, like, was this the Boba Fett comeback that fans have been waiting for? I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's many layers here, but I'll be damned if I'm going to think Boba Fett's a good guy at this moment. But he could be.
Not after what he did to Han.
He's had a hard life. I get it. It's all right.
Yeah. He's no good to me, Dad. Well, Chris, I think we've said it all.
We got there. I believe we'll have some. You'll hear some words, perhaps, from some of the fellow droids.
Apparently.
The form of a dispatch. Bringing it down to the wire. But we'll get this out to you, and hope everyone's staying safe. Wear your Mando masks. Don't wear an actual fabric mask under a real Mando mask. That could be dangerous. Only wear the one medical mask. Don't put a mask on a plastic mask on a cloth mask. I felt the need to say that. I heard of one of the episodes we talked about. Can you wear a mask on your... Don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, but wear a mask.
But wear a mask is the point of that.
Do the right thing. Yeah. Wear a mask. Everybody stay safe and healthy out there. It's it's tough times. But we got Mando on Fridays.